Hello, this is the Surviving Healthcare Podcast, and I have a, a remarkable uh, episode here about aluminum toxicity, and I've become convinced that this is the most toxic environmental problem that does the most damage for us. And although it's not the most toxic of the poisons we're exposed to, and that dishonor goes to mercury and other heavy metals, aluminum is far more common. It's in the air and on every surface. It's a worldwide contaminant that is now just everywhere. Avoiding it completely is impossible. Aluminum is protected and its foul properties ruthlessly concealed by an industry that is knowingly murdering us for profits. The first hints about methods to protect ourselves from its ravages were from Exley and Krause's studies. They demonstrated that consuming silica water, such as Fiji, chelated it and actively promoted urinary excretion. Most recently, total body loads were quantified using the OligoScan, a device that every mainstream researcher has overlooked. 6,000 scans of individuals worldwide using this device have shown that without exception, everyone examined has aluminum toxicity. The best news is that the co-authors of this post have developed another silica chelator for aluminum that has been proven to work better than Fiji and, unlike commercial bottled water, contains no heavy metals or other toxic contaminants. They've conducted preliminary studies using the OligoScan, and their substance is now commercially available via links at the end of this post. I started taking it recently and will have a follow-up OligoScan in 3 months to see what happened to my aluminum levels. And so this is Jonathan Rickert and Jeff Leone, and they will take this podcast away and tell us the story.
Yeah, totally. Where do you want me to start? You want me to do a little introduction of myself and OligoScan and my experience?
Jonathan, what? Yeah, that sounds like the best place to start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so my name is Jeff Leone Jr. I'm the creative director of OligoScan. Um, I've been in this role for about 5 years now. I've been scanning myself with the OligoScan for about 10 years. My father is the global distributor of OligoScan. He's been doing so for 15 years. Um, I was blessed to be raised in a household of holistic health and alternative nutrition. My grandpa, my dad, and my godfather started Douglas Laboratories back in the early 80s. So they ran that business for 39 years before they sold to Nestle in 2009. And one of the things I'm most grateful for, being raised by my father, is just this curiosity into the root cause and into what is the truth behind health. And I remember as a kid, since my father ran Douglas in Europe and in Asia, and my uncle ran it in the United States, my father was constantly traveling to Europe and Asia, and he would bring home books that just ended up stacking through our library. So I would spend a lot of my younger teenage years reading the books in our library, and just I really became fascinated with material. And a lot of it was really out there and was not, according to the mainstream. But that always sparked an interest for me. So my journey with the OligoScan really started in college. My dad, after he left Douglas Labs, they sold the company. He brought the OligoScan home, and I tested myself, and I just straight up did not believe it. My scan was terrible. Granted, I was a college kid with a very big work hard, play hard mentality. I was a good student. I was finance major, entrepreneurship minor, but I was a big partier. And just one example of that is I actually was taking anti-acid medication 4 times a week when I would drink to prevent my face from getting red. Little did I know that anti-acid medication is one of the highest sources of aluminum. So anyway, I continued to scan myself throughout college, continued to see pretty deficient, toxic results, did not believe in the OligoScan, graduated from school, decided that I wanted to go into the real world, and I moved to New York City, and I was working in the freight forwarding industry for 3.5 years. Continued to OligoScan myself throughout that time. My test report definitely got better, but I was still partying a lot. I think the biggest difference in my OligoScans from college to New York City was that my diet got a lot better. In college, I went to school in Oxford, Ohio, and basically middle of nowhere. Closest Whole Foods was 45 minutes away. So I was eating dining hall food, and it really reflected in my report. So in New York, I started taking better care of myself. Still didn't quite really believe in it. Never really gave it any thought. Um, and then I guess just keeping this short, fast forward after 3.5 years of working in the corporate world, I realized that, well, basically, I had a calling to go to Peru and sit with ayahuasca, and the biggest takeaway from that experience was I wanted to do something that I was passionate about, and I've always been passionate about health. So I took a leap of faith, quit my job, left New York City. This is all right when COVID started, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But the last week of New York City that I was there before I left, I took a biomagnetism course by Dr. Garcia, and it was a really eye-opening course. And I knew that I made the right decision, that this was what I wanted to do. Basically, at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do. And over the course of COVID, one of the things that really changed my life was actually reading The Carnivore Code by Paul Saladino. And my grandpa always taught me that you have to practice what you preach. And I was in no position to start working with OligoScan because I was really under this mission of correcting my own test report first. And after I read the Carnivore Code, the light bulb kind of went off for me, and I thought that this might be a solution. Long story short, I basically did the carnivore diet for 30 days. My test report drastically improved. All my vitamins, all my minerals drastically improved. I attribute a lot of that to organ meats. This led me down this path of wanting to get as close to my food as possible. And I ended up moving to Hawaii. I was working on a biodynamic farm. I got into hunting. I started working with ranchers and farmers. And I was living in Hawaii. And after 6 weeks, I said to myself, this is a pretty good life. I have a girlfriend. I'm living in paradise, but I'm not fulfilling my mission. This is not why I'm here. And at that point, I moved back to the States and decided to join my father with OligoScan. 4.5 years later to today, I've scanned about 6,500 people. And, I'm not a doctor. I don't give medical advice. I consider myself a free thinker and a dot connector. And I've had some really incredible mentors along the way that have taught me a lot about not only the OligoScan interpretation, but just root cause alternative health in general. Dr. John Gamble being one of whom, he's our naturopath in Australia. Michael Fesler, who I'll talk about later, but his work with aluminum detoxification in the lymphatic system. Dr. Raymond Palpletz, clinical medical toxicologist. He's really one of the leaders to produce a lot of interpretation analysis with the OligoScan. So it's been a journey for me. I'll try to end it there if you have any questions. But
Jeff, if you can just back up and discuss the principles behind the OligoScan, how it's different from
yeah,
blood testing and so on and so forth, that would be the best
yeah.
underlying.
Totally. So OligoScan is using the full visible light spectrum. We're using spectrophotometry. We're shining the light into the palm of the hand, into the peripheral tissue. The concept is that every metal and mineral is an element. Every element has a different color, and that color is determined by its atomic emission spectra. So when the light hits the peripheral tissue of the hand, we're basically measuring the momentum change of light, how much of that light was reflected and absorbed. So we're looking at the peripheral tissue. And we're looking at what's accumulated in terms of metal toxicity and what minerals are available for the body to use. A blood test is looking at what's in circulation. It's looking at the past 24 to 48 hours. The blood is basically the transportation system of nutrients. The body wants to keep the blood in homeostasis. So it's really only looking at recent intoxication. It should be pretty stable. Hair tests are looking at what the body's excreting via the hair in the past 90 days. One of my other mentors, Dr. Rashid Buttar, rest in peace, he did a study, and I encourage everybody to look this up, Congressional Testimony 2004, Rashid Buttar. He looked at two sets of children, and basically he gave them both a hair test. One of the groups was normal kids. One of the groups was autistic children. After doing the hair test, all of the autistic kids, none of them had any metals coming out in the hair. All of the regular kids had metals coming out in the hair. And really what that shows us is that the hair is an indication that we're excreting. We're not going to dump all of our metals out through the hair. It's not the major way we get rid of metals, but it is an indication if the person's excreting or not. Urine is looking at provoked or unprovoked excretion capability via the kidneys in the urine. So blood is looking at transportation. Hair is looking at excretion. Urine is looking at excretion. OligoScan is looking at accumulation. And what I tell people with the OligoScan is, it's not a perfect test. It's looking at the peripheral tissue. It's not looking at the brain. It's not looking at the kidneys. The only way to know how much aluminum is in the brain is to take a biopsy of that tissue. Well, nobody's going to do that. It's extremely invasive. Nobody wants to take a brain sample of their brain. So we use it as a benchmark, as a baseline for the overall intoxication. And from my research, what I found is that about 85-90% of the time, the OligoScan is right on the money. It's the 10, 15, 5% of the time where it's not representing the true toxicity of the person, either because it's not a heavy metal that we're testing, or because the metal is in a location like the brain and it's not represented in the peripheral tissue.
So this, in a nutshell, this is about 15-year-old technology that's used in other industries, is widely regarded as accurate, and it might be a very good surrogate for total body metal or other problems. It is a pretty good surrogate for total body mercury or aluminum toxicity, and also it is an excellent indicator of other nutrients such as vitamin D and other things. So is that an accurate thing to say?
Yeah, I mean, what I tell people is, it's not a diagnostic tool. We're not diagnosing anything. It's a nutritional assessment. So if I can scan somebody and learn three things about what minerals are deficient in this person's peripheral tissue, that's really valuable information for me. If they're low in zinc, if they're low in iodine, if they're low in selenium, those are three of the most important minerals for cellular defense in the body. So I take it as valuable information where I can then tell somebody these are the minerals we need to focus on, or these metals are accumulating in the body. Why are they accumulating in the body? And what I do is that every single person that I test, I ask questions because I'm trying to verify what the test report that's shown is actually accurate. So I ask questions, and most of those questions have to do with their lifestyle, diet, water, surgeries, medications, environmental toxins, where do they live. So after doing that so many times, it's it's matched up. I mean, one of the most common things is the aluminum. My first question for people with aluminum is, do you have a hard time breaking a sweat? And I would say 8 out of 10 times, anybody that has high aluminum in the red, the answer to that question is yes, I have a hard time breaking a sweat.
Is it true that every scan you've done is showing toxic aluminum?
Yeah, I would say 9 out of 10 times the aluminum is above the high minus, high plus threshold, which is, we want it to be below that threshold or kind of at that line. But yeah, for the most part, I've never seen an aluminum level in the green zone. It's I think it's a combination of we have a lot of aluminum that we're exposed to on a daily basis. I also think possibly the reference ranges, even at the time when the Brazilian scientist who created the OligoScan, he did hundreds of thousands of tests, both in the northern and southern hemisphere, and eventually he combined the data sets. But even at that time, maybe at that time the aluminum, the reference range was slightly lower. But regardless, 9 out of 10 people, the aluminum is above that threshold line.
Jeff, you're into the weeds. So
Yeah.
the let me interpret something that you said for the listeners, just so they
Yeah.
understand what it means. You said it's not a diagnostic tool. Well, frankly, I think that's nonsense. I think it is a diagnostic tool. And the reason why Jeff is forced to say things like this thing is over the counter, and there are legal sanctions against anybody but an MD claiming diagnostic capability. So, I don't mean to say that anyway, it's just a problem. Jonathan, you take it away here. And Jonathan has the structure of this podcast that he wants. So go ahead and uh, ask questions and say whatever you'd like.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us on. Yeah, so I kind of come into the story with Jeff around February of last year, He was passing through the area I live in, and I was on his list because I was considering buying one. I had one OligoScan about 8 years prior, and at the time, I was doing some hair testing because I was doing health coaching and looking at metals and minerals, but I didn't have a way to really understand how they interact with one another, which is critical if you're going to do these kind of testing. And immediately, I noticed that my aluminum was high. I also had high mercury from the amalgams, but the aluminum thing shocked me. I expected to see the mercury. And he just sort of casually said, "Yeah, everybody's high in aluminum. It's just there's so much in the environment. That's just how it is." And my focus at the time was on bioenergetics. So it was really about how do you maximize energy production at the mitochondrial level? How do you maximize ATP, activated ATP output? And as I started to look more into what the effects were of aluminum toxicity, I was actually quite shocked that this wasn't spoken about more within the bioenergetics community, because aluminum will bind 1,000 times stronger to ATP than magnesium will, which is shocking because if it's bound, it's basically inert and unusable. It also will inhibit every single complex in the respiratory chain. With the scale at which it's in our environment and at which everyone's intoxicated with aluminum, that became a focal point of something to try to fix. And so I basically proposed to Jeff that over the summer we do a informal study. I'll get a cohort of people together here where I live that are willing to do like a day 0 and a day 60 test. I put together a basic protocol that everyone's willing to follow, and so this was, say, June to August timeframe. And basically, Jeff ended up coming out in August to help with all the post testing and give a lecture with that as well. And about halfway through, I started doing the math on how much bioavailable silica people were actually getting in my cohort group, and it turned out a really small amount, essentially an amount small enough to not make a dent. And that you know, without throwing some of those companies under the bus, I'll just not mention them. But not every form of silica that you take is bioavailable. That's one. The second piece is that you need to be taking quite a bit of it in order for it to have an effect.
So again, to back up for 1 second, most of my readers read my posts about Exley and Krauss and how well silica water works. And that's pretty well demonstrated through study. And Fiji is the kind of flagship that Exley has used as the thing that worked the best. So right now, Jonathan is talking about using 3 pills twice a day of his new substance. Is that correct?
No, actually, I'm talking about, so we did 2 studies the second one followed the first one, immediately followed the first one. And in the first one, we were using basically supplements like over-the-counter capsules. And so there's a well-known supplement company that sells a form of silica that we were using in that test group. We were also, and this is I think important because Pectisol gets a lot of attention in the alternative health sphere. I think it's very good for some substances, but people need to understand that all of these binders that we use to bind metals have different affinities. So it's not going to act the same on aluminum as, say, on lead. And that research needs to be done before you start using these substances, because you just may be wasting a lot of money and time trying to get something out that's not going to come out. And that's what we found with Pectisol, is very low affinity for aluminum. The other silica form that we were using also had a low affinity for aluminum. So what I ended up doing about halfway through is I took myself and my whole family off that protocol and put them on another protocol that included a different form of silica. And so at the end, when Jeff came up to test, he was shocked at how much my aluminum dropped and how high my silicon levels went in the OligoScan. And that's what,
30% for you. Was that it?
yeah, it was 24, 25% change.
And that was
Yeah,
over
it was
two
really
months or
dramatic.
three
Jeff
months.
actually said out loud, "I've never seen silicon increase this fast." It was a 30-day period that this happened, by the way,
Wow.
this fast. And so then he was interested, and that was kind of my intention, without telling him, was to get him interested in what I was
Now to
doing.
back up once more, would you characterize aluminum as the worst toxic exposure that we have,
Yeah,
given the
well, I agree
volume
with
of
your
it?
initial statement. I don't think it's the most toxic metal, but I do think
I
it is
didn't
the
say that.
biggest problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
because of the scale. It's just, it's everywhere and it's not going away. Now, like with the example of mercury, this is a generational problem, mercury, and when dentists stopped using mercury in amalgams, it really stopped being a problem for humanity. And so like Jeff says, if you're over 45, mercury is likely to be your highest metal.
Jonathan, I got news for you. They didn't stop using
Yeah.
amalgams. They're still
Yeah.
inserting some ungodly number of
Yeah.
amalgams in the United States every freaking year, and it's
Yeah.
still it's maybe it decreased 25%, but on all
Mm.
the Medi-Cal kids, and I mean they're still putting all the mercury they can in. It's an outrage, and the dentists themselves are still dying of mercury poisoning.
That's a
Anyway,
shame.
sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you. It's
Yeah.
a great story,
So,
but
just to give you some sorry.
overall, you would characterize aluminum as a bigger problem just because of it's
Yes.
so ubiquitous.
Yeah, I would say that that is the biggest problem metal that everyone is facing right now. And
Yeah.
it
And because
is
people aren't aware of it.
What's that?
right. People are not
Yeah.
aware of the
They have no
scale at the
idea that their
problem.
dentists are poisoning them in other ways too. The
Yeah.
dentists are the
Well,
second
just to
worst
give you
medical
like to
specialties.
give you a reference here, so when we started the study, I had my family included in this group of 20 people, and so there's five of us. My kids at the time, 3, 6, and 7, their mercury levels were all in the green. Okay, no known exposure. Their aluminum levels for all of us were all in the high plus category, all of them. And one of them, my 6-year-old son, was in the red excess category. And what's shocking about that is we have no known, like if you look at toxicology labs and reports, even some of these clinical testing labs, when they give you the list of the sources of aluminum, which Jeff will talk about a little bit later, we don't have any exposure in my house. There's no local exposure that I can find. There's nothing in the kitchen, no vaccines to worry about, no antiperspirant for a 6-year-old, you know. So it's like, where the hell is it coming from? But it's high. And so that is really what got the fire under me going. I wanted to fix this issue because kind of associated with that were some behavioral things that he was experiencing. And 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 so what we also found with people that have very high, like in the excess red zone of high aluminum, were pretty significant deficiencies in lithium. And they only really show up when you have a high burden of aluminum. So, I'm in the high plus category. Most of my family is. Everyone, I would say, with the exception of like 5 people in our study group that we tested. So 75%, 80%. They are in the high plus category. You don't see a lithium deficiency, but if they're in the high plus, every single case they had a lithium deficiency. And what was interesting was right around the time that Jeff and I were discussing doing the second version of our study, where we actually formulated a complex that we administered to people, and then we actually were looking. So everybody's on the same thing, the same dose. A paper came out in Nature that described the effect that beta amyloid plaques had in the brain in depleting lithium from neurons. And so that was showing up in the OligoScan data. And so that was like highly relevant. So what we did was we built this formulation using MMST, which is a different form of silica. We also added in a pretty, the standard adequate intake dose for magnesium. We use the malic acid form, magnesium malate form, because there's evidence in the research that malic acid also will bind to aluminum. So it acted as a secondary binder. We added in the lithium in the form of lithium orotate. And we also added in boron. We had a different form of it, but there's like another FDA snafu that could have happened. But the boron is quite interesting. And Jeff's really the expert on boron, but I'll just speak briefly about it. Boron has protective effects against aluminum and other metals, and it is quite deficient in people's diet. So, and then we added some active B6 to assist in the magnesium uptake. And on that protocol that occurred over 60 days from roughly August through November, because we were starting people at different time periods, we had an average of 18% decrease in aluminum.
Wow.
It ranged, we had some people that it would decrease maybe 12%. And then we had a number of people that had excess of 20%. So 23%, 24,
Just 60 days.
Yeah, just 60 days. Now, this is not a linear decrease. And the same thing you see in HTMA or in hair testing, HTMA, where you can test a kid, like Jeff was talking about. You can test a kid with autism, and you may see zero aluminum in that hair. It doesn't mean it's not in the body. You just haven't provoked it. And so you have to give a substance that's going to bind to the metal that you want to look for in order to see if it's actually in the body. So in almost every case, at day 30, when we tested, the aluminum levels were much higher than they were at day 0. And the reason for that is it's getting mobilized. It's moving from the storage areas out of the body. And we're seeing that flow show up in the hand. And so the same thing happens in hair testing. If you give someone a bottle of Fiji water, 30 days later, you're going to see a huge aluminum dump.
Do they get any Herx reactions from that or not?
Yeah. So I'd say, maybe 50, 60% of people reported some kind of a detox reaction. It varied. Some people, it was headaches, which resolved with just adding more water because, as you mentioned, urinary excretion is the primary exit point. About 95 plus percent is coming out the urine. So increasing hydration, supporting the kidneys, it resolved the headache. Some people, it reported like pretty strong lethargy, just wanted to like nap all day long. Some people reported achy joints. And that also makes sense because our body stores silicon predominantly in the connective tissue. And so the way I interpret that is aluminum binding to that endogenous silicon that we have and the turnover from adding actual silicon that it can replace. So, but in terms of like storage locations for aluminum, it's about 50% in the bone, about 25% in the lung, and the other 25 is distributed across, organs and tissues. And, a remarkable amount ends up in the brain. And that's why we see most of the pathology occurring as neurodegenerative issues, in relationship to aluminum. Not something, it is not as overt as like, say, osteoporosis. So the bone is a safer place to put it. That's why the body puts it there. And, with regard to the lung, the ATDSR, which is the toxicology agency under the FDA's control, states that the lungs are 25% storage. It's a storehouse for it. I think that's the entry point. I don't think that's the storage site. That's my view of the issue, and so. But anyway, you don't have people showing up with lung cancer because of aluminum. So the brain is really where we're trying to focus things. But as a result of doing this aluminum elimination, a lot of it is coming out of the bone. And so there is a important synergy that's occurring between silicon, calcium, magnesium, and boron that are increasing bone mineral density as this aluminum comes out. And another interesting finding from our studies was, and this happened personally for me, was a huge lead dump occurring along with that aluminum dump because it's coming at 95% of the lead that we store is in the bone also. So there's that sort of simultaneous turnover that's happening.
Well, thank goodness you've got something that works. For mercury, we're stuck with this NBMI, Boyd Haley's compound,
Yeah,
which currently is $500 a month. I
I
mean,
know.
it's crazy. I'm taking it, and I guess I've got my mercury tied up, and now all I have to worry about is aluminum. Tell me just quickly, what's your boron and your lithium orotrate doses in your compound a day?
We have 5 milligrams of both. So the lithium's in the lithium orotate form, the boron's in the boron glycinate form, so bound to glycine.
That sounds reasonable. The only thing is boron, you can take teaspoons of it a day, 2 teaspoons, and you just take borax, right? And that stuff's pretty pure.
Yeah, you could. This is the FDA snafu I was mentioning. There is, it's like a gray area if they wanted to come down on somebody for
Oh my
using
God.
borax or boric acid, which is what we used in our first
Yeah.
formulation, because boric acid just has a much higher yield of boron than, and you can get 99.99% pure. There is the possibility, albeit small, of an overdose, which can happen with boric acid specifically. So it's this like if the FDA wanted to do something, they could smash us. So we just decided it was safer to use boron glycinate.
So, but you would, between friends and not in a public forum like this podcast, you might say that it would be reasonable to take a teaspoon of borax in addition to this thing, but you can't formally recommend it. Is that accurate?
Well, so let me put it this way. I was giving my family and my children boric acid for the boron before. I didn't have an issue with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to.
Jeff may have some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I mean, without going too down the rabbit hole, because I tend to do that a lot. I looked on their website, and what's interesting is like the highest list of contaminants are all other minerals. They're not heavy metals. So I generally think it's pretty safe. But yeah, we try to provide it more in a clean manner for people that don't want to take borax because, I'm responsible for training a lot of clinics and practitioners, and most of them listen with an open mind, but I got sick of telling people to take borax because it kind of made me look a little bit out there. If I'm being real.
Yeah, I wrote a
Um,
post about that, which you can access in my archives.
yeah, I want to mention one other thing too. Along this journey of me meeting Jonathan, I stumbled across this book called "The Synergy Between Minerals and Important Physiological Processes" by Elizabeth Hutches, and actually I brought it when I met Jonathan, and for me it was it was the eye opener that I needed to read, and what it really revealed was that the aluminum, which is an antagonist, right? It's a heavy metal that serves no biological purpose in the body. Aluminum has it antagonizes minerals. In particular, it's all the minerals that we put in this formula. So what I like to tell people is that 200, 300 years ago, you wouldn't need to take aluminum export because we didn't have such an overabundance of aluminum in our environment.
That's their trade name. That's their name for the product. It's 3 pills twice a day. Aluminum export.
Yeah, so you wouldn't need it because you didn't have this overabundance of aluminum. But if you have the overabundance of aluminum, and you always have to control what you can control, but even if you're really a stickler at it, you're still getting aluminum from the atmosphere and from the rain and from the soil. You have to give the mineral antagonist. You have to give the minerals that are being compromised by the overabundance of the aluminum. Um, when it comes to aluminum, in my opinion, it's really all about three things. It's about number one, you got to reduce the metal from coming in to the best of your ability. The problem with mercury fillings is that you have to get them removed out of your body, which costs thousands of dollars, which a lot of people don't have. The other thing with mercury is that a lot of these people have had fillings in their mouth for 20, 30 years. That's a 24/7 slow drip of mercury into the body. With aluminum, you need to look at all the common sources and try to reduce as much as you can. That's number one. If you don't reduce the source, how do you expect to detoxify? Number two, you have to provide the mineral synergists for the antagonists, the boron, the lithium, the silica, the magnesium. And then number three, you have to excrete. You have to maximize the excretion out of the body via sweat and via innate detox pathways, liver, kidneys.
Saunas.
Yeah, I mean, and I always tell people like, my dad started a supplement company 40 years ago. I'm all about supplements. I've always been about supplements. And for the case of supplements today is really twofold. We have in this country and across the world, we have a water issue and we have a soil issue. It's really that simple. Our soil in America has been monocrop for 40, 50 years plus. You can grow a crop at NPK fertilizer, but phosphate fertilizer is not the same as ruminant animals pooping on the ground, driving it into the ground with their hooves and refertilizing the soil. So phosphate fertilizer is adding heavy metals to the soil, but it's not providing the full spectrum of minerals. So when you grow a plant in soil that only has NPK, it's not absorbing the rest of the minerals, particularly boron.
NPK.
NPK fertilizer. Yeah,
What
nitrogen,
is that?
phosphate.
Oh,
Yeah.
nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium.
Yeah, exactly. Phosphate fertilizer. Fun fact: Florida is actually one of the largest producers of phosphate fertilizer, and they're mining it from the ground. It's the fossil layer below the earth. But in doing so, it not only creates these massive waste pools of wastewater, but it's contaminated with heavy metals. So that's number one is we have a soil issue. The food does not have the minerals that it did 40, 50, 60 years ago. Number two is we have a water issue. I think choosing organic over non-organic is a no-brainer. My question for these organic produce companies are what kind of water are they watering the plants with? I mean, it's probably well water, shallow well water, or it's probably city water. I mean, look at the average water test from any major metropolitan area. I mean, there's chemicals, there's fertilizers, there's pesticides, organicides, pharmaceutical metabolites. So and that's why if that's why basically like the silica, and Exley pointed this out in his research. If you look at the Hadza and the blue zones across the world, these are some of the people that live the longest. Well, ironically, their water has the highest level of silica. Most Americans are not getting silica because it's not in our water, and they maybe wouldn't need as much of that silica, but when you introduce an overabundance of the aluminum, you have to provide the building block. So for those three different reasons, that's why it's important not just to take the mineral balancing supplement, but you have to work on reducing the toxicity, the exposure, and you got to work on maximizing the excretion. And it's really a three-prong approach. It's not as easy as just taking a pill. And I encourage people to really, fact check me, look into this stuff, because sweating is one of the best ways to excrete. If you think about what does antiperspirant do? Anti-perspire, anti-sweat. What is the definition of perspiration? It's excretion. That's how it's excretion. So when you put a metal on the underarm, you block the lymphatic system from its ability to sweat, you're no longer excreting. So sweating is key. Other things you can do is like magnesium Epsom salt baths is a great way for transdermal excretion. Adding in some borax, adding in some baking soda. It's interesting too. I've been really passionate about detoxing aluminum. Obviously, I actually reached out to an ionic foot bath company, and I was skeptical. I reached out to them, and they sent me a foot bath, and I sent them an OligoScan, and we did a little study. And I found that my aluminum decreased over 1 month period by 20%.
Wow.
So my point of this is that it's always about incorporating multiple things. If we want to get results, we have to incorporate, we have to think big, and we have to incorporate the whole picture.
Are you guys in the sauna every week?
I am, yeah, 3 times a week.
Good for
Yeah,
you.
I'm at 3 times too. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
I'm thinking
You know,
about
I just
getting
want to
one.
piggyback off of something Jeff said here. And I think, you know, look, full credit due to Exley and Krause for the work they've done.
Yeah.
It's really the keystone of what we built our product off of.
Yep.
However, one thing they didn't, that at least in our view, they did not meaningfully talk about the other minerals that are antagonized by
Yeah.
aluminum.
Exactly.
And maybe it's just because they didn't look for it. But with the OligoScan, we have that data. We have a very large data set, and we can see when aluminum's high, magnesium is low. When aluminum is very high, lithium is also low. And so the relationship at least between the antagonism between aluminum and magnesium is pretty well known and well established. And Exley, in some of his work, also talked about the relationship between amyloid plaque formation and free iron and free copper in the brain. So, but it does look like upstream of those two things, aluminum is the driver of that. Um, so that I think is our unique contribution here is the full spectrum approach to ameliorating the aluminum problem. Because you could say drink Fiji water, you can get aluminum out that way. That's well demonstrated. You're not going to replete the other minerals that are lost, one. And two, now you've got, in our view, a contaminant problem from Fiji water. And three, it's more costly. Four, it's cumbersome. You know, I do, like my dad, who's got, you know, cognition issues, is not going to drink 1 liter of Fiji water every day. And he's just not going to do it. And he's also not going to spend the money for it. But he'll take the capsules.
Before we get into the Fiji water contamination and all that, well, I'm sorry. You noted something else that I wanted to talk about briefly, but I've slipped my mind. But so go ahead. Sorry to take you off the track here.
Yeah, well, I think we just want to justify why we have the formulation that we have and the results that we've seen, not just in the decrease in aluminum, but also in the increase in these antagonized minerals, silicon, magnesium, and lithium. And you know, so our study was really over 60 days. We have a smaller group of people that are continuing it longer term. And so, you know, that includes my family. I think Jeff's family is
Yep.
involved. And so Jeff just sent me a report for somebody that was on it for 4 months. She had a 25% decrease in aluminum over that 4 month period and is trending downward. So I want to explain this because uh, metals, any metal that you're going after is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think that's really important to set expectations. You don't want to try to make it happen as fast as possible because you will do a lot of damage whenever you take these metals out. And they will redistribute in some cases. And they will redistribute to places you don't want them redistributing to. And so the best way I think the safest way, short of an acute exposure, like you break a mercury thermometer and you get it all over your body and in your mouth, the safest way is through mineral balancing, the way that we're doing it. That being said, the ATDSR estimates that an average healthy adult in the United States has a 30 to 50 milligram burden, total body burden of aluminum. The European agencies also agree with this number. I think that that's conservative. I think that it's higher, especially if you have some type of pathology that is correlated with aluminum. So let's just say for basic math that it's 50 milligrams that a person has. That's not all going to come out 1 month. If you are just drinking Fiji water or you are just taking our product, you can probably expect something like 4 to 5 milligrams to come out over that month. If you are also layering sauna, then you can expect more to come out. And Exley actually did a study on this. He measured sweat excretion post exercise, and it ranged across the board how much came out. But in one case, there was an excretion of 7 milligrams in a single sweat. So if you do everything Jeff just talked about, where you minimize input, you take some form of silica, hopefully it's our product, and you sweat regularly, 3, 4 times a week, something like that, you're going to move this pretty quickly. You're going to move the needle pretty quickly. So you might be looking at 6 months or 10 months before before your level is in a position where it's not negatively affecting your mineral balance, which I think is like the most critical piece here. Because if you're deficient in magnesium, you don't have energy, as we just talked about with ATP binding. So, and really, that's in my view, that is sort of the core. As soon as you disrupt energy, you disrupt an organ or a tissue from working well. And so if you can restore that, then you're doing pretty good. If your level is low enough of any metal that it is not creating an energy problem in a tissue, then you're doing pretty good. And then what's more is, because this background exposure is only going to increase over our lifetimes, our children's lifetimes, it's not going to decrease. They're mining more aluminum now for new purposes that didn't exist, like rare earth mineral extraction. And I was just looking at the aluminum market data, their projections over the next 10 years. I mean, it's like a hockey stick. It's like up and right. It's like whatever investor wants to see, up and to the right. And that's what's being mined out. So there needs to be, once you get your level in a good place, high minus, or in even better, you get into the green normal area. There needs to be a maintenance strategy where you're taking some amount of silica every day to mitigate that inevitable background input.
Yeah, and Jonathan and I remember when we first met and when we decided we were going to do this, I was like, what's our slogan going to be? And we determined that it's going to be the realist meets the purist, because we are both purists. In a perfect world, I would really try to avoid all supplementation and just be able to exist sustainably off the land, hunting, gathering, planting, collecting spring water. The reality is, we're not going to get the same minerals that our ancestors did 200, 300, 400 years ago, because mainly of industrial pollution and the industrial revolution, and the simple fact that the soil does not have the nutrition that it did once in the past. So that's really been our motto. If you're not getting the minerals from the food or the water, you have to fill the gap. You have to be a realist and somehow get the minerals. Otherwise, you're going to have a mineral deficiency. And one of the exercises I have people do with the OligoScan when I see a mineral deficient report is, I have them go to chronometer.com and I have them type in everything they eat for a typical day. Keep a food diary for one day and be honest with it. Go to the bottom of that report and look to see what percentage of the zinc, what percentage of the iodine, what percentage of the magnesium, what percentage of the calcium I'm getting. And if you've only got 20% of the zinc, 30% of the copper, and 40% of the magnesium, for example, and you extrapolate that over 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, you got a mineral deficiency. So you have to fill in the gaps. And what's really ironic is that silica, lithium, and boron will not be on that chart, because there's no RDA. This is how much we think you need. It's zero. They don't have it established. So you won't even find those minerals on that chronometer chart.
Do you need copper? How many people need copper?
Everybody needs copper. Copper and zinc. They're absolutely essential.
Well, it's not commonly supplemented, is it?
Yeah. I always, copper and zinc, I personally like to get from food. Oysters and beef liver are the two best sources of both. But some people aren't going to eat. A lot of people aren't going to eat liver, and a lot of people aren't going to take oysters or eat oysters, shuck their own oysters. So that's where supplementation can be advantageous. But I mean, zinc is one of the most important minerals, especially for detoxing any heavy metal. Zinc is involved in I think 200 different enzymatic processes in the body. It's incredibly important.
Yeah, especially cadmium.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, copper is controversial. You know, if you ask the root cause protocol people, the Morley Robbins camp, it's like maximize copper.
Yeah.
And then but then there's the other sort of more mainstream group that, copper's toxic. All of these minerals that we use need to be incorporated into proteins and enzymes. They need to be bound. Okay, so that's really important to note. It's the unbound minerals that cause problems. So the unbound copper, the unbound iron, which causes a lot of oxidative damage. And so, yeah, and also the other important thing here is that there's a Goldilocks zone for every mineral.
Yeah.
Too much of something is going to be harmful, and too little of that deficiency is also going to cause problems. And so, copper is not you don't need as much copper in your daily allowance as you do zinc or magnesium or potassium, which is the highest that most people are not getting enough of. And so I think there's just bigger levers you can pull on to get results than just smashing copper. And yeah, so I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, and I think it really also depends on the state of the liver. Because what I'll see on the OligoScan is, some people are deficient across the board. You have mineral deficiency, zinc, copper, B9, B6, all the minerals trend to the left and the vitamins as well. And then in other people, you'll see excess copper and a displaced zinc. So basically it appears that the copper is high and the zinc is even higher. And this is one of the most confusing topics on the OligoScan, and it's one of the topics that I've struggled to figure out for the longest time. And I'm grateful for one of my mentors, John Gamble, naturopathic doctor in Australia. He's done 10,000. He's probably one of the only people that have done more OligoScans than myself. He's been in practice for I think 20 plus years using the OligoScan for 10. And he wrote this book called Mastering Chronic Disease, Toxicity, Deficiency, and Infection. Toxicity creates deficiency. Toxicity and deficiency create an environment where infection can thrive. Anyway, one of the chapters in his book explains this copper toxicity. And what I'll see in people is this high copper, high zinc. And how I interpret it, and from John as well, is that it's all about like, why is the copper accumulating? If you have somebody that has high copper, you're not going to tell them to eat beef liver because they don't need any more copper. But the question becomes, why has the copper accumulated? And from both of our research, it's almost always because of a stagnant liver, biliary tree blockage. Now, what causes biliary tree blockage? Overeating, stress, pharmaceutical drugs, birth control, xenoestrogens, emotional trauma, stored emotional trauma in the liver and the gallbladder. And one of the books that's also changed my life was the Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Flush by Andrea Moritz, and he talks about the gallstones and the liver stones thought to be in the liver and the gallbladder that basically block bile secretion. And if the body is not secreting adequate bile, and there's stagnation in the liver, then that's going to impact the digestion of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. So I think that it's not just as easy as saying like you need to take zinc and copper, you don't need to take it. That's where I like the OligoScan to really look and see where somebody's at. But when I see the copper toxicity and the zinc blockade, and I start to ask questions pertaining to why could the liver be congested, most of the time it adds right up. And that's kind of how I use it to really make the biggest difference.
I'm I'm impressed with you guys. I'm totally out of my depth.
Yeah.
Look, this has been the topic of mineral metal antagonisms, mineral balancing, and it is sort of cordoned off to the side as a pseudoscience. It was, from the guys that first started doing it, Paul Eck, David Watts 50 years ago, and then their predecessors, and then all the way up today. And now we have the OligoScan, which, I think is if you're going to do one test, do an OligoScan. You're going to get a better view of your mineral situation than all of the other tests that you mentioned before. But that being said, it's like when we were at A4M, I was shocked at I was shocked at how few practitioners understood this basic
Yeah.
mechanism of metals antagonizing minerals. And so I think part of it is to do with the way that the data is presented on the test itself. You've got one section of the test, here's your mineral profile, and then a different page on a different section, here's your metal profile. And so the way that it's presented is that they're two different things that are autonomously operating for one another. And so if you've got low magnesium, oh, the answer is just add magnesium, right? Or if
Yeah.
you've got low, so that's sort of like the mentality. Oh, you've got mercury, so you know, DMSA or something. And and so that education really needs to come into play because when you're looking at the mineral world, you're looking at base reality. Everything's built off of that. Like it's like minerals, and then it's vitamins, and then it's macronutrients, and then it's, and involved in all that is circadian biology as well. All these things are interacting. And so that's what got me so excited about learning about these metal antagonisms, because really it is like looking at base reality. You're not going to be able to perform any function well with a deficiency or toxicity.
So
It's the foundation.
you guys both eat liver once a week, just like our mothers used to give us when we were kids. Or my mother, I'm 72. That was
Well,
a long time ago.
I do,
Jeff
yeah.
may be from his animals that he's getting.
Yeah.
I don't tolerate it well. And but so you go like, okay, what are the primary things you're getting in beef liver, right? Jeff mentioned copper. It's a great source of heme iron. I get plenty of that. I get plenty of copper in other forms. I like oysters, so I eat that pretty regularly. It's a very big source of vitamin A, retinol, preformed vitamin A. But that's also in egg yolks and also in dairy, especially if it's raw, which I consume a lot of. And I don't have, both OligoScan and serum, I don't have an issue with vitamin A.
Are you
My
a
vitamin
carnivore,
A's are
Jeff?
Yeah. So short answer is no. I mean, I primarily eat a lot of wild game that I hunt myself. But I'm not strictly carnivore. I think there's a need for proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. I don't just eat protein. I don't think again, in my opinion, it's all about balance. And just eating animal-based food is not balanced unless you're the Inuit living in, the northern hemisphere.
Well, Jonathan, you've got other places to guide this conversation. If you've run out of things to say, I can.
No, no, I'm just trying to choose what
Yeah,
not to
yeah.
say, actually. Yeah,
Say
because like,
anything you
look,
want. Nothing's off limits.
look, I would love to have a whole nother conversation at some point, whether online or offline, about just macronutrient profiling. I mean, this is also something practitioners don't understand. And, like gluconeogenesis as an example, like how are you gonna, like everybody pretty much agrees that increasing stress hormones is not a good idea for health and longevity. Well, why are you telling people to eat things that are going to increase gluconeogenesis that require stress hormones? Like, that don't make any sense. So you have to have carbohydrate in order to prevent excess gluconeogenesis. So, it's like this is also the reason why that long-term carnivores end up losing their testosterone.
Yeah.
It's why it tanks. It's because they're not getting enough carbohydrate to offset that gluconeogenesis, which is then lowering testosterone. And so anyway, that's a little, like side quest that we probably can't afford.
Well, no, no, I'm going to have a codicil to that. So when you're 72, you've been on, if you're smart about it, you've already been on testosterone replacement for decades. So, and of course I have been, and I mean, I can't hope to generate it from my body. Over 50, it all declines. Although I have seen testosterone levels of 160 years or 1,060-year-olds, males,
Yeah, I mean, I got
you
a
need
friend
you
that
need to
was
be
actually,
supplemented. You need to be
I
supplemented.
got a friend who's 64. His total T is 950.
Yeah,
I
he's the
like,
exception.
yeah, well, yeah, but I mean, look, Anyway, yeah, so we can talk about that later. But um, I think what's what would be useful right now is Jeff knows quite a bit about sources of aluminum
Yeah.
because you were talking about
Yep.
mitigating inputs, and I think that's critical.
Give it to us double barreled, Jeff. I want to hear everything you think.
Yeah. First off, I also just want to,
Don't be shy.
I won't. I also just want to mention that um, I'm also grateful for Dennis Kraus because he introduced me to silica water, and he actually got me down the path of realizing that silica was important. Also, Dr. Bill McGraw, his podcast with Wendy Myers was a game changer for me at the same time. And I'm grateful for all the people that are bringing this issue up because the reality is that most people have no idea. The biggest sources of aluminum. So processed food averages about 24 milligrams a day. One of the highest culprits is cheese pizza. Sorry, frozen pizza. The cheese itself can have 14 milligrams. Pancake mixes, 72 to 180 milligrams.
How does it get in there, Jeff? Why is it so high? Is it the packaging?
I think it's the way that the machines and the processing. It's like the anti-caking agents as well to keep moisture from getting in the mix.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Antiperspirant deodorant, obviously, is a big one, about 70 milligrams in application estimate. Cookware is a big one, pots and pans. One of the scary things that I've noticed when I've traveled to South America is that almost everybody is using aluminum. And the question becomes why? Because it's very cheap.
It's cheap.
It's cheap. Um, Especially when you cook with an acid-based sauce like a marinara or red sauce, that makes the absorption of the aluminum into pots even greater. So when you're eating out, for example, you say, "Oh, I don't buy any like processed cheese." You go get a burger at a place on a night at a town on a Saturday night, you know, they're probably using Kraft cheese or something similar, cheap. So you think you don't eat it, but when you eat out, you do eat it, and you don't know what kind of pans these people are using. Um, Aspartame, apparently 60%. Anti-acid medications, buffered aspirin, but like Pepsid ACs,
Aspartame is an artificial sugar.
artificial sugar. Yep. To my knowledge, it contains up to 60% aluminum. And again, it's like anti-caking agents. Um, Toothpaste, like your regular fluorinated toothpaste, cosmetics, makeup. Tap water has about zero point 0.1 milligrams per liter or zero point 0.1 ppm,
Reverse
which doesn't.
osmosis takes care of that, though, right?
Yeah, I think it really moves like 99%.
Yeah, yeah.
But regular tap water, zero point 0.1 zero point 0.1 ppm. The scary thing is that fish in a river, if it gets to 1.5 ppm of aluminum in the water, the aquatic life begins to die. So you might not think that zero point 0.1 is a lot, but if you're drinking zero point 0.1 on a daily basis for 10, 20, 30 years, and you add in these other things, it adds up. Sunscreen is a big one. Obviously, vaccinations. Um, the thing about vaccinations, this is my opinion, is that sometimes I'll scan OligoScan. I'll scan kids, and the mother comes in and tells me, "Yeah, my kid has autism." I'll scan them, and I'm shocked. And this falls into that 10% what I mentioned earlier of the test not representing the true toxicity. I'll ask the mother, when did the symptoms start? Right after the vaccination. I'll look at their OligoScan. The aluminum's high, but it's not crazy high. And my theory is that the adjuvant basically penetrates the blood-brain barrier and goes directly to the brain and does the damage. And it's not about the quality. It's not about the quantity of aluminum, but it's about
Adjuvant is the aluminum in the vaccine that supposedly activates it. It's
correct.
For the
Yeah, so it's not about the amount of aluminum. It could be a very small amount, but it's penetrating the blood-brain barrier and it's going directly to the organ of a young child and it's doing the damage. That's my opinion as to why it doesn't show up as high on the OligoScan as we would anticipate. Whereas with Alzheimer's, in my opinion, it's long-term quantity exposure to aluminum over a greater period of time, which is why you'll see it higher in older people.
Now, Krauss convinced me. I read his books. He convinced me that Alzheimer's is aluminum. And you would say that's correct.
Totally.
That all these other theories are essentially nonsense.
I would probably 100% agree with that.
Or they're downstream of aluminum. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's important. There's a cascade that looks like happens, at least at the mineral metal level. And so, I'll just jump in here and insert this piece, Jeff.
Please.
is that look, there's a big difference between ingesting aluminum and injecting aluminum.
Yeah.
Okay. So, ingesting aluminum, not all that 24 milligrams of aluminum in your crappy frozen pizza is going to be absorbed. A
Exactly.
lot of that is going to be excreted in stool. But all of that injected aluminum is going to have to get put somewhere. And aluminum travels around the body on transferrin, which is the iron binding protein that moves iron around the body. It has a very high affinity for transferrin. And so the primary way it gets into the bone or into the brain is passing through the blood-brain barrier on transferrin, where it then will be deposited into the transferrin receptor. And there are a lot of transferrin receptors in the brain. It can also get into the brain with on aluminum citrate complexes. This is the second way that it does that. But um, when and so I think that's really important to know. And iron. And so I'm saying this because downstream, at least with the Alzheimer's case, right? Downstream of aluminum is the displacement of iron into brain tissue as a result of this. And so this is something that Exley pointed out in his Alzheimer's papers is this relationship of, seeing a lot of unbound iron in the amyloid plaques. So I'm saying it's a down, like many of these things that are talked about, like the lithium deficiency as a result of amyloid plaques, it's downstream of the aluminum toxicity.
Let me just put a footnote on here. Okay. Iron is highly toxic, and you should know your transferrin levels because it's an index of how much iron you have in your system, and you should be. I think the number is if it's less than 200, it's not too bad. But if you're north of that, and some people have iron transferrin in the thousands, you should develop a pretty aggressive program of blood transfusion to get rid of your iron and bring your total hemoglobin down. This is particularly relevant for people who take testosterone, who tend to accumulate red blood cells and have higher uh, total body iron loads. And you should be aware of this and monitor it. It's very easy to check. Your healthcare provider will check transferrin level, and then you can decide what to do. You don't have to ask them because they're ignorant about it. You just go off to see the Red Cross and donate blood every month or two.
Yeah,
Sometimes
and
you're
and
trying to be
on
more
that.
aggressive. You can go to two different places. They'll only do it every 2 months.
Yeah,
Anyway, go
on
ahead.
that note, a couple of years before I met Jeff, I was doing a pretty heavy iron depletion protocol myself. I was doing phlebotomy monthly to get my ferritin down, and I was watching my transferrin saturation, my serum iron, my hemoglobin levels, and so look, optimizing your iron status and making sure that the recycling system that is dependent, in large part on ceruloplasmin, optimizing that is a buffer to aluminum uptake.
What does that
Okay.
mean exactly?
Well, it's like the same principle as, say, getting enough calcium in your diet is a buffer to the uptake of lead. So, ionic mimicry is this sort of methodology where if a transporter or an enzyme does not have access to the primary mineral it's looking for, so it will use the case of calcium transporters in the gut, then it will upregulate. And because lead is of similar size and similar charge, it can enter the body on those transporters. This is why aluminum will bind heavily to transferrin, same principle, ionic mimicry. And so it's like making sure that your food and your dietarily replete, like Jeff was talking about, using a tool like chronometer, food and then supplementation, if you can't cover it with food, is critical in buffering your uptake of toxic metals. And iron is one of those things. It's not just more iron, it's bound iron. Okay, so that's the critical thing is that it's bound to transferrin, that it's bound to hemoglobin, that it's bound to ferritin, and that it is not just unbound in the tissue creating oxidative damage.
It is looking like to me, without having studied it very extensively, that excess iron is a much more pervasive problem than iron lack, which is what we were taught in medical school. Is yeah, you had to replete iron, and I would sometimes give intravenous or IM or intravenous iron after surgery if I had some blood loss, and so it made sense in that setting that women felt pretty good. But you know, do you remember the ferritin level that is desirable? It
I'd
slipped my
use
mind.
under 100
Under
is
100.
yeah. So like the window 50 to 100 is what I shoot for, and mine will accumulate. So every 6 months I'll do like a bag of 450, 500 mil removal.
Oh, what do you mean? Removal. Oh, you
So I'll
mean
do
you exsanguinate? Yeah.
yeah. I'll
You
take
can
I'll do
donate blood.
phlebotomy and take out about 450 to 500 milliliter of blood.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. Have you been on testosterone or not?
I've not.
Wonder
I
why
mean,
it's
I'm at
accumulating.
900, so I'm doing pretty good at 48. My nine, that's decreased maybe 50 points since I was 30. So,
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. Okay, sorry to throw us off the track here. You're on. What do you want to talk? You want to let Jeff?
aluminum sources, I think, did you,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I was just wrapping up. I would say the other one would be tea, some teas. There's also this relationship with oxalates, which are anti-nutrients, and it basically gets bind to the aluminum. So some teas can have high levels of aluminum. And then the last one I'll mention is it's getting in the atmosphere via stratosphere injection, and that is then coming down and it's getting into the soil. And we have to understand that the more aluminum in the soil is lowering the pH and it's preventing the plants from uptaking the nutrients that it needs that we depend on. So it's a big deal. I mean, and if I encourage people to do their own research on this topic, and I'm not trying to instill any fear because that's not the answer, but we have to be aware of this, and we have to be aware of you know certain patents that are designed to grow crops in aluminum rich soil that are genetically modified. I mean, these exist. So it's just important. This is kind of the world that we're stepping into and that we've been in. And again, the whole point of this is we have to take the steps, every step that we can control to reduce the input, maximize the output, and provide the building blocks, provide the minerals.
So we know the jet fuel has been absolutely filthy for 15 years. They changed the jet fuel quality.
Yep.
And, I tried to look it up, but I have a feeling that my sources are adulterated, on the online. But I've heard that there is aluminum in the jet fuel exhaust. Is that the case?
Yeah. Also, smeltering plants, also just aluminum extraction plants. They use calcium fluoride to extract the aluminum, so it creates atmospheric pollution. High sulfur pollution, which gets rained down, creates acid rain, and then lowers the pH of the soil. So it's getting into the waterways, it's getting into the soil, which is affecting the crops.
It's a huge industry with tremendously powerful lobbyists. It's unbelievable.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I was reading that article that you sent me about aluminum jet fuel, and like
that was just a random search. Yeah.
well, and I verified it, from a couple of different sources, so it looks accurate. The no, I don't think anyone's arguing that there's not a lot of aluminum in the air. No one's making that argument. The argument in the debate is around where is it coming from? What is the
Right.
source of
Exactly.
this aluminum? So there's no question that there is a ton of aluminum in the air that is getting into the soil and water. That is not debated. It's not controversial. And regardless of where it's coming from, the action steps are still the same. It's still the same, regardless of the source, which is you got to take silica in some form in order to bind this and get it out. And the only way that I can think of that we might be able to get down to the source point of this atmospheric aluminum is with doing a, custom boutique lab that can do aluminum speciation testing, where you could then determine, is this coming from, dust that is coming from the Earth's crust? Is it aluminum bound to silicate? Is this aluminum bound to iron? Is it aluminum bound to sulfur or sulfates rather? Um, then you could probably pinpoint more the source of this kind of thing.
Well, we know about geoengineering, and that's definitely a thing. The thing that I wanted to avoid here was getting into the chemtrails debate, and we have so much to talk about, whether or not that is largely a psyop or whether it's more absolutely accurate story is. We can leave it to Jonathan's summary that it's not controversial that aluminum is ubiquitous, and we had no way to measure it before these OligoScans, and as far as I can tell, and no way to measure it very accurately or conveniently. But now these are like a 5 second thing. You just put the electrodes on your left palm, and then you've got this fabulous readout, and mine looks terrible. I'm curious whether um, Jeff's has cleaned up with everything he's done. How does your OligoScan look now?
Yeah, well, it's funny. Somebody asked me that at A4M on the spot, so I went ahead and she's actually a client of ours. So I scanned myself at the time, and it was great. That being said, I scanned myself yesterday, and what's really interesting, and it's been fun for me because I've had the privilege of using this device for the past 10 years and looking at the changes, and I'm trying to take more notes about what did I experience. But anyway, I scanned myself last night and my sulfur was probably one of the lowest it's ever been. And 3 days ago, I've just had this like incredible throat pain, like just sore throat. Like I can tell that my body is fighting an infection right now. And it's still weird because I feel pretty good, but I can just tell that I'm fighting an infection. And we know that sulfur is needed for detoxification. So it's interest, and when you see the low, so basically I had lower sulfur, and what's interesting is my aluminum, my cadmium slightly increased. So how I interpret that is my body's fighting an infection. It's not prioritizing detoxing heavy metals. It's prioritized on fighting the infection and getting me back to homeostasis. So my sulfur is dropping because the body's using up more sulfur. The metals are slightly rising because the body's shifted its priorities. And I like to remind people of that. It's like, a lot of us say like, okay, this month I'm going to detox heavy metals. It's not really how it works, right? The body is always going to decide what's best for you, and it's going to tell you through symptoms, but the body is in charge. We can't force the body to detox. The body's going to do what's in the best interest of us, and it's to keep us alive. So I always kind of try to take that approach. But yeah, by and large, my test has radically changed because I've changed my lifestyle 180 degrees since college.
So these things are they're $4,500 and they're available to everyone. You don't have to have a license to get it, as I understand it. It costs $50 a scan to use it, and there are 500 of them placed throughout the United States and the world. So if you're in any major metropolitan area, you can get on OligoScan, and if you get on these guys' product, I would recommend that you get a scan before you start and 3 months later so you can prove to yourself that your aluminum has gone down. Now, one of my friends has used this device for a decade, and she says she could run her entire practice off this. She has other machines and devices, but this is the core truth in her practice that she uses to monitor all kinds of health issues. So, anyway, that's hopefully helpful.
Yeah, it points us in the right direction. It's giving us valuable insight as to what, from a mineral and metal perspective, from an elemental perspective, what is available for the body to use and what metals are too high that have accumulated that are therefore impacting the status of the absorption of minerals. That's how I use it. It's not going to look at glyphosate. It's not going to look at pesticides. It's not going to look at cesium. It's not going to tell you not going to look at mold, but it gives us a mineral and elemental understanding of where we need to work at. And that's the reason why we eat food and drink water. It's for minerals. It's for things that our body can't produce. We need to get it from a source, food.
Jonathan, what else do we need to cover here?
I,
We'll
I
have
think
another
the last
session, I promise.
I think the last point is about Fiji water, and contaminants in Fiji
Right.
water. And so this is just standard it's the gold standard because that's what actually didn't use Fiji water in his studies. He used spritzer water, which actually was something like 25% lower silica content. Fiji has the highest commercial. It's the highest amount of bioavailable silica in a commercial water. And I think not long into this over the summer when I was starting to look at what are the different forms of silica that you can use to bind aluminum, Fiji came up and almost like the next week after that, I started seeing third party toxicology like water testing done on Fiji water. And there's a great app. I use it. Jeff uses it. It's called Oasis, where they essentially do this for all consumer products, but they started with water. And in 2025, they rated Fiji in their top 5 worst waters of 2025 because of contaminants. One piece of this I can speak about. Jeff knows more specifics than I do about the contaminants, but one piece is that part of getting silica in the water comes through the rock formation and the slow dissolving of that silica into water. What is almost always accompanied with that is arsenic and fluoride in the same rock formations. Now, some argue that this is a negligible amount. In my view, any amount is important to mitigate if you're aware of it.
Tell,
Kind of
tell the
like which,
Hormesis story. This
yeah.
is
Well, so
insight.
hormesis is like used quite a bit in the biohacking community. I think mostly as a good thing is like a low level of stress will create a positive adaptation that will essentially a little bit of stress makes you stronger. This is the basic idea of hormesis. But I think this is just a blanket statement that can't be applied to everybody's context because that would just assume that everybody has the same level of energy production and the same level of stress resilience, which we do not, especially if you experience a chronic disease. That is a stressor. And so like stress, in my view, is something to be avoided altogether. The positive benefits of, say, exercise is not because of hormesis. It's not because of the stress response that it creates. It's from the protein synthesis and the protein stimulation, the muscle growth that exercise induces. Does that make sense? They're two different things. And so along the way, when this concept was first identified as a biological mechanism, it was co-opted in large part by industry, especially large multinational corporations, to essentially say, oh, a little bit of poison as a byproduct from, say, mining something, some byproduct of a metal going into the water. A little bit will make you stronger. A little bit's okay, or it'll like benefit you because of this hormetic effect. And so, you got to be careful when using that. But the point is that there is arsenic and fluoride in Fiji water, uh, you know, and we just don't think, among other contaminants as well. You were
Yeah.
recently looking at the report,
Yeah.
right, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean it's 0.001 milligrams per liter of arsenic, which is 250 times the recommended limit. And then it's 0.006 milligrams per liter, 300 times the limit of chromium, hexavalent chromium. But the biggest one for me is just that it's in plastic. And from a sustainability standpoint, like it's a different story if like I'm traveling and I'm on the road and I go to a gas station and Fiji water is there and I have a couple other different options that probably are worse. I'm choosing the Fiji every time. But if I'm using Fiji every single day for 3 months to try to detox the aluminum in my body, that's not the best option. It's also not the most sustainable option. I mean, I'm all for silica water, natural silica water. That's the best source on the planet. But we're trying to help the masses here get the raw mineral that they need, and it's just not sustainable. And you don't want to be drinking out of plastic every day. That's at least my opinion.
Okay, I wrote a post about this and I'll send it to you. I don't,
There's a
I disagree with that largely, but anyway, we don't have to debate that.
Yeah.
Look, there's PFAS in it, forever chemicals. They've identified barium in there. They've identified nitrates in there. They've identified sulfates in there. I mean, we're talking about drinking a liter of Fiji water every single day for 10 months to a year to through a full aluminum depletion.
Well,
That's
yeah.
that's gonna accumulate.
Let me just say one thing about this too, and it's from my research. I was in Florida and I tested this. I would say she's probably in her 50s, female. I oligoscanned her, and she had a classic thyroid problem. Okay, chromium low, iodine low. Her antimony was off the chart, and she told me she can't lose the weight. She's trying everything, and I asked her what kind of water she drinks, and she told me plastic bottled water, basically for the past 10 years on her ranch in Florida. Now, the problem really is, in my opinion, in the summer when it's hot, and I'm not talking specifically about Fiji, I'm talking about all water and plastic, is, when the water is getting shipped and it's on a loading dock and it's sitting out on the gas station, and you don't even see it, like the water bottles are sitting outside under the sun and it's just baking in the sun. You have the plastics beginning to leach into the water. So again, I think it's a sad reality that a lot of people have to rely on that because they think it's better than tap water, and it totally depends on the brand. But my point of view is it's probably not good from a common sense perspective, especially if we don't know how long that water's been in the bottle and where it's been. That's just my point of view. But anyway, antimony is
Antimony. Yeah.
antimony is a toxic element. It's going to impact the thyroid. It's going to impact the iodine. It's going to impact the chromium and the ability to lose weight. And I'll see it a lot of times in older women. Another common source that I think it's coming from is from plastic in microwaves, like the plastic containers. It basically leaches into the food from the plastic containers. And anytime I see high antimony on somebody's test, I'll always ask them, do you use a microwave? And do you microwave in plastic? So just thought that might be an interesting tidbit for the listeners. You're not a fan of microwaves, are you?
Who, me? So, Jonathan,
Mm.
do we need to go anywhere else, or is this enough for one
I
day?
think we're complete. Yeah.
Guys, I really appreciate it. The thing that stuns me is how safe silica water is. And I will leave a link to how you can buy this stuff. It's a hell of a lot cheaper than buying Fiji water. And you can take 3 pills twice a day. That's what it is, isn't it, Jonathan?
Yeah.
And,
That's our standard
you
dose.
know, ideally it's taken without food, but for me, I can't stand to take anything without food because it upsets my stomach. So Jonathan says most of the people in his study took it with food.
Yeah.
So that's reassuring to
Hmm.
a fellow
I do
like me
both.
who's so sensitive.
Yeah. Yeah. I do both. It just depends.
All right. Well, thanks so much, guys. I think this is a stunning podcast, and I'm grateful for your help.
Thanks,
Thank you
Doc.
very much.